the heavy fall is largely attributed to the lockdown brought on by the coronavirus pandemic, which severely disrupted economic activity. Its Ebenezer Sabute has more in the following report.
The second quarter of 2020, Ghana's economy has contracted by 3.2% from an oil perspective. From a non-oil perspective, we also saw a contraction in the economy. Specifically, for the second quarter of 2020, we saw our GDP being 35,590.4 million Ghana cedis relative to 36,839.7 million Ghana cedis that was recorded for the second quarter of 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in 37 years, Ghana's economy has seen a contraction, which indicates that the last time the economy contracted was in 1983. And for emphasis, the oil sector contracted by 3.2% and the non-oil sector contracted by 3.4%. We share with you quarterly real GDP growth rates from two perspectives. By finding the average over the last 7 years, that is from the first quarter of 2014 to the second quarter of 2020, and look at how that compares with only the second quarter of 2020. From the perspective of oil and non-oil, we see that from both perspectives, as was indicated, restricting the GDP estimate to the second quarter of 2020, we saw that from both perspectives, the economy contracted respectively by 3.2% and 3.4%. Relative to what happened over the last 7 years, that is the first quarter of 2014 to the second quarter of 2020, we saw these two sectors, that is the oil sector growing by 4.6% and the non-oil sector growing by 4.1%. We do the same analysis from the three sectors' point of view by comparing GDP estimates for the last 7 years with GDP estimates for the second quarter of 2020. And with the exception of the agricultural sector that saw an expansion of 2.5%, both the industry sector and the services sector saw a contraction. Specifically, the industry sector saw a contraction of 5.7%, followed by the services sector contracting by 2.6%. Relative to what happened in the previous 7 years, for all three sectors, that is agricultural sector, we saw an expansion of 3.6%, industry sector 6.0%, and services sector 4.1%. We go ahead to share with you, because of the uniqueness of the second quarter 2020 GDP estimates, we share with you sectors that saw an expansion for the second quarter of 2020 and sectors that saw a contraction for the same period, that is the second quarter of 2020. We provide two estimates for your guidance in interpreting these growth rates across sectors that saw an expansion and sectors that saw a contraction. And these estimates are the subsectors' share of total GDP and the growth rate. The subsector that saw the highest expansion is the information and communication subsector. But it is important to realize that the information and communication subsector comes forth in terms of the share of total GDP. We have the crops subsector that saw the highest growth, having a contribution of 12.0%, followed by construction subsector having a share of 8.5%, and transport and storage following with 6.3%. So although these three sectors have higher relative shares to GDP, they come low in terms of growth rate, and information and communication subsector that saw a growth rate of 74.2% has a share of only 5.9%.
Now joining me via Zoom with more on this development is Government Statistician Professor Samuel Kobna Enim. Thank you very much, Professor Enim. Now, can you explain to the layman as much as possible what this means when you say the economy has contracted?
Thank you very much. The contraction in the economy should be interpreted from the perspective of the value additions across the various economic activities. So from the agricultural sector point of view, what has been the value addition from an output point of view, and from the industry and services sector, what has been the value addition. So over the period, we've seen growth rates in excess of 0%, But as was rightly indicated in today's release, we see a contraction in the GDP estimates from both an oil and a non-oil perspective. This means that our output levels have reduced. It is important to distinguish between the current prices of our GDP estimates and the constant prices of our GDP estimates. From our current prices point of view, it's influenced by both the effects of prices and output. But because we are interested in the real GDP, that is to measure the extent to which productivity has gone up, we deflate the current prices with the price deflator, and that gives us a sense of how actual goods and services over the period have increased. So what this means is that between quarter 2 2019 and quarter 2 2020, down by 3.2%. And if you do the estimations without taking into consideration the effects of oil, our economy contracted by 3.4%. That is, goods and services, value addition of goods and services have decreased by these respective percentages.
All right, so you're saying this decline in growth, as far as you're concerned, has to do mainly with the COVID-19 pandemic and the way it's impacted the economy.
Indeed, we are able to attribute the contraction to COVID-19 because we did share with the Ghanaian populace the effect of COVID-19 on business activities. And the GDP computation, as I explained earlier on, is largely due to the outputs that we get from our business activities. And here I define business activities in a broader context to include what happens across all the three sectors. And during the release of the Rapid Business Survey, the one focusing on the business sector, one of the highlight stories that we put out was the fact that some businesses had closed down, both as a result of the partial restrictions at the instance of the president and the restrictions that followed even when the restrictions had been lifted. So we saw quite a number of our firms closing down in the month of April, where we realized that there were decreases in sales, especially for the accommodation and food sector, for the manufacturing sector, and for the trading sector. And even in the months of May, June, which is the window within which this 2020 quarter 2 GDP has been estimated, we still had some of our firms close down. So the closures of the firms and the associated dip in sales, as was released during the COVID-19 rapid survey on the business tracker, is clearly the hint that we use as basis to attribute the contraction to the COVID-19 effect.
Now, the impacts of COVID-19, it's felt not only in the second quarter, it's lingering or lingered into the third quarter. Do we anticipate another decline in economic growth in the third quarter?
I'll be circumspect in indicating that another contraction is going to happen in the third quarter, simply because a number of interventions have been instituted, and it's going to be a play out on how these interventions would mitigate the further effect of COVID-19. But indeed, one would be careful in saying that the 3.2 would not experience a sharp turnaround as we move into the third quarter and the fourth quarter. As you rightly put it, the effect of COVID-19 still lingers on, especially when we have some restrictions still in place and when we had the international borders still closed down in most part of the third quarter of the year. So we still would have some effect, but the extent of the effect, as in whether it's going to be a contraction or a much marginal increased growth rate, will depend on how the interventions are able to mitigate the effect of COVID-19.
All right. Now, how much of the 3.2 or the negative or the decline, how much of that is going to impact on the annual or the overall growth rate GDP for 2020?
The contraction that we've experienced in the second quarter of 2020 would have to compete with growth rates or otherwise for the first quarter of 2020, as well as the third and fourth quarters of 2020. It will be recalled that in the first quarter of 2020, we recorded an expansion in our economy of 4.9%. And now we've recorded a contraction of 3.2%. So moving into the third and fourth quarters, the outcomes would inform the annual GDP for the year 2020. And again, as was indicated earlier, the prediction of that depends on the extent to which we strongly face the effect of COVID-19 in the next 2 quarters of the year.
All right, thank you very much. That's Government Statistician Professor Samuel Kobna. And in moving on, some depositors of defunct microfinance and savings and loans companies queued up Wednesday at consolidated bank branches to receive their outstanding claims, this time in cash. This was after government released some 3.65 billion cedis to the receiver, Eric Nanenipa, to facilitate the payments. Nicholas Brown has the details.
Depositors of the collapsed microfinance companies, savings and loans and finance houses will from today have full access to their funds. It follows the government's resolution of the original commercial paper, also known as bond. The government yesterday released a total of 3.56 billion Ghana cedis to settle the remaining depositor claims of the 347 defunct microfinance companies, 23 savings and loans and finance houses. Affected customers have been directed to visit any branch of the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited to receive their monies through the new funding arrangement. Today, we are here at the head office of the Consolidated Bank Ghana Limited to ascertain the facts whether or not these customers have been able to access their funds. Now, I have a customer here with me, so let's try and speak to one customer. How long have you been here?
About 30 minutes ago.
And have you,
I decided to sit at the customer's lodge to be served by a friend. So that's why I didn't come to meet anybody here per se, but I didn't want to go through the normal process.
What did you want to go through the normal process?
Because I had a lot of things I was addressing at that particular time. So I needed privacy to make calls and to receive calls, whilst my colleague did my transactions for me.
So have you been able to have access to your funds?
Yes.
All of your funds?
All of my funds.
So what was the process like? Take us through the process.
Okay, what I did was to close the account and take everything in it, because the account was opened for this account balance to be transferred into. So I just closed the account and took all the money.
Great. Was it seamless? Was it hectic?
No, it wasn't. Very seamless. I was very relaxed. Yeah, and I was served.
So how long did it take you to go through the process?
The process, I'm sure, about 5 minutes. About 5 minutes. I was doing other things, but I just filled a form, account closure form, and I did a account withdrawal form. That's all. Just 2 forms.
I guess you are happy and relieved now that you have your funds.
Yes, I am.
Now, we've been trying to speak to some of the customers to ascertain whether they've been able to get access to their funds or not. However, we've been unsuccessful, but the information that we are getting from the officials of the bank indicates that most customers are not withdrawing and closing down their accounts, but they are, maintaining the accounts if they are assured that their monies are going to be in their account. So we are going to bring you more in our subsequent bulletin. Reporting for Joy Business, Nicholas Brown.
Well, the Ghana Hotels Association says none of its members who applied for the micro, small and medium enterprises category of the National Board for Small Scale Industries Fund have so far received any fund. At least 64% of hotels closed down at one point or the other during the last 6 months of the coronavirus pandemic. President of the Hotels Association, Dr. Edward Aka Nyameke, tells Joy Business that the industry has been suffering. He joins us in the studio for a discussion now. So you're saying your members have still not received whatever package that was promised?
Israel, not yet. Not yet.
What are they being told?
Well, we've been receiving various reasons for the situation.
And this is not the first time we've been having this conversation.
Exactly. And I wish I would be telling a different story, but it hasn't changed. We understand that they are having challenges with the banks that they are partnering with. At one point, they said some of the information we provided were incomplete, and all kinds of reasons. So the situation is still the same.
What do you intend to do about it, knowing that or seeing that you've been at this for a while and nothing seems to be happening?
Well, Israel, that's why today we organized a press conference. We realized that 12 September was 6 months into the pandemic. And the fact is that the hotel sector, and for the tourism and hospitality, is one of the worst hit enterprises as far as the impact of the COVID-19 is concerned. 6 months down the line, our members have faced all kinds of challenges. Challenges with staff salaries, challenges with the payment of loans, challenges with utilities, all kinds of things. And the government announced certain interventions and support. And we realized that 6 months down the line, some of these supports have not been accessed by the hotels. But we try to access, but the typical is the water, and then the 600 million Ghana cedis through the NBSSI, and then the 3 billion syndicate facility. So we decided to bring that information to the public, to let them know that 6 months down the line, this is how we are faring.
Is it the case that, or what's your sense? Is it the case that the money is still getting to the NBSSI and it's not forthcoming, or the money hasn't actually gotten to the NBSSI in the first place?
Israel, when the finance minister read the budget, and I was asked for my comments on it, what I said was that the budget, the review report contained very good policies. The challenge will be the implementation, and that's exactly what we are seeing. We believe that the challenge is with implementation of the good policies that the government has been announcing. And I think it's high time the president descends on his appointees to do the right thing and to put effective measures in place. Because look, the NBSSI disbursement or the application started on May 19th. May. It's been 4 months. 4 months. I mean, what kind of system is it to take 4 months to disburse just 600 million Ghana cedis?
But can you say that with the opening of the airports, the occupancy rates have since improved?
Not significantly.
But there has been some improvement.
Sure, there has been some improvement. You can tell that there is some new air breathing into the industry. However, it's very subtle, it's very slow, except that it gives us the hope that it will get better over the period. But it is not significant. And that is why we keep pushing for this support, because we really need it to survive the period.
Why don't you come up with some creative ways, suggest some creative ways to government to see how your situation could be improved? One of them, which has been suggested, is the PCR test that's happening at the COVID tests that are happening at the airport. There are people who are saying that it's discouraging people from coming because you have to pay $150. But if there was a situation where people could come in and be quarantined, done a PCR test done for them, they'll be quarantined in hotels for a day, just a day to get their results. That could be a way of assisting the hotel industry.
Israel, don't forget that the same hotels were involved in this 14 mandatory day quarantine. And
you made some good money.
Well, some of the hotels made some good money from that. But you see, you can only offer ideas and suggestions when you are consulted. Okay, well, you can only do that when you are consulted. We were not consulted on this arrangement with the opening of the airport.
It's not too late. Why don't you make that call to them?
Well, I'm sure today they have heard our message, and I'm sure they will act on it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Edward Aka Nyameke. He's the president of the Hotels Association. Now, moving on to pharmacists are shifting gear from preparing and dispensing drugs to manufacturing car detailing products right here in Ghana. Why the shift? Today on the Joy Business Fund, we engaged Dr. Yusuf Saka and William Kojesiama, the entrepreneurs behind Autodazzle.
Pharmacists Dr. Yusuf Saka and William Kojo-Siama are in the lab today, not experimenting on drugs. They are formulating car detailing products. It's your own formula. I guess just like me, you're wondering how the two pharmacists got into this in the first place.
We love cars. Especially when cars are shiny, yes.
We've always had a passion for cars. I mean, to the point that in school, when you open our laptops, the first thing you see is a screensaver with some Mercedes-Benz or a BMW, and we can tell you what brand it is, what model it is, that kind of thing. So we've always had a passion for cars.
After uni, they got a bit curious and for their PhD research, looked into what products are used for car detailing here in Ghana.
Quickly we realized it's only fabric detergents that are used to wash cars, and we realized no, that will straight away damage your paint, and that's not acceptable. So do something better.
Yusuf and William got to work experimenting with chemicals and developing formulas that suit the climate in this part of the world.
The kind of tests we had to do, we had to first of all buy some products from the overseas market and put them, run some tests on viscosity, efficacy, and what have you. It took us 4 years, the entire duration of the PhD and more. Even to this day, we do research. We're still improving our products because our environment is quite tricky.
Next, they had to market.
Marketing was a bit difficult because, marketing involves a lot of investment. So we kind of did a lot of the marketing ourselves, by going to some of these retail outlets who are interested in stocking car care products, or those who are already stocking products that came from outside. So it was easier to get into those markets because already they were importing car care products. So once you get some reviews, you let them know how useful it's been to some of the people on the market already. They are quite prone to stocking some of the products. So that's where we started.
Yusuf and William take us to meet one of their customers, Eddie, a professional detailer, owner of Majesty Imperial. We get to see for ourselves the magic Autodazzle performs.
So since we started production in May 2017, we've worked with quite a number of detailers. And they've been very useful. I mean, they've helped with promoting the brand, obviously because of the kind of quality they get from the product.
And they have developed different formulas too: snow foam to quick shine, wheel cleanser, paint cleanser, and tire dressing. On the average, they produce about 300 bottles a week. There are plans to increase production.
We started with car products. Now, we've been approached so many times by people who want us to formulate other things. We have built a shower gel brand with 3 headlining shower gels for a company. Yesterday, we actually had a meeting with a manufacturing plant which wants us to make an industrial cleaner for them. We are currently in talks with people in the mines to do degreasers for them, and it is amazing when we think about it. We just wanted to make some shampoos to make cars shiny. Now we're looking at so many other things.
It's been 1 year of operations, and just like any startup, they faced a challenge or two, but the prospects are bright, just like the finished work.
Nice. Well, as expected, the car looks better than new.
It looks totally different from how it came in.
Yeah, Majesty Imperial at work again.
Majesty.
Good job, man.
Well done, Majesty Imperial. I appreciate you, man.
Well, that's quite commendable, and so we wish Otto Dazzle all the best. But that'll be it for Business Live. I'm Israel. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good evening.